we'll see. I'm gonna like spit on my lip lotion.
Oh yeah, you don't want to do that.
No, I'll leave this in. Welcome back to Transcending Humanity. This is episode 49. Yeah. I'm Vanessa Joy, aka Vanessa Radial. I'm joined today by Erica Vogel, your Trans Aunty. Trans Aunty. Is it auntie or auntie?
I say auntie. It's probably because of just the where I grew up and how it's said. But I think a lot of people do say auntie, but I have always said Trans Aunty.
I think auntie's cooler. Did you notice I changed your Discord name to the Trans Aunty?
Actually, no, I did not. I should have paid attention.
You're the Trans Aunty. Taryn is the Trans Menace.
She is, so for sure.
She certainly is. Reminder to people, the views and opinions expressed on this podcast and YouTube are our own and not those of our respective employers or organizations or whatever. Reminder, Patreon, we like money. Really like money. Even though my business is doing better right now, I could still, it'd be nice to have this show pay for itself.
Totally.
That would be my ideal thing. So, and you can support us on Patreon or on through Buzzsprout. And we have the merch shop, which I have the new Kamala Harris shirt up that I think I plugged last week, and I've sold one of them. So, cool. So far the merch shop has sold 2 things.
It needs to sell many more things.
Yeah, it does. I've sold one antihistamines bag and one of the Kamala shirts, and then I bought a bunch of stuff myself. But so, anyways, today I am joined by the lovely Erica. As I said, Erica is a soon-to-be published author, and so today we are going to be talking about writing. But Erica, it's been a hot minute since you've been on the show, so just introduce yourself. Go through what's up, what's new, all that wonderful shit.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I haven't seen you all in a while. I think it was spring the last time that I was able to be on. Still doing the same old things. I work in technology. I have a partner. I'm super fucking trans and queer. And I've been writing a book. Well, actually, I wrote a book. Now I'm in the middle of publishing said book. Advice from your Trans Aunty.
And your Trans Aunty is Erica, and Erica is going to be giving advice today on writing about being a Trans Aunty.
Yeah, sure.
Or something.
Circular logic.
Exactly. Erica has sent me a copy of the book. I have actually just started reading it. I barely have any time to do anything. So
you're waking busy.
I'll let you know I've opened it, and it's on my phone now. So cool. It's not too long, so I should be able to power through it. But
it's not too long. I think. I think what I sent you is an 89-page Word document in print. We're estimating about 160 because by the time you typeset and chapters and all that stuff and double line spacing, it really almost doubles in length. So, but something that I think most people could read in a weekend, depending on your. Nothing's hard in there. It's really. Let me back up into what the book is. It is an advice column in a book. So there are something like 47 questions that I've been asked that I give my sort of perspective on, and each question gets answered in 500 to 700 words. So it's super easy to read. You can stop wherever you want. There's not a plot to follow, right? So it's very consumable.
Which is definitely, especially this day and age we all have the attention span of a gnat. So
I know.
Yeah, especially in the trans community because we're all fucking neurodivergent. And what's that? Oh, wait,
so, squirrel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have black squirrels in DC?
We actually have a black squirrel that lives in our backyard. It's really? One of 2 that I've seen. I've also seen an albino squirrel before, but not in the DC area. That was when I was in North Carolina.
Yeah, the black squirrels came from Ohio, and it's interesting to see how they've from what I understand, I mean, rumor has it, it was like a genetic experiment at Kent State University. But who
for what reason?
Because science, I guess. But Kent is known as the black squirrel's kind of an icon in Kent.
It should be a mascot. I guess.
Yeah.
I just thought that was like a normal, divergence of species and colors. I mean, obviously we know squirrels as sort of being gray and reddish brown, but when I saw a black one, I thought that was wild, but one who lives in my backyard.
Maybe someone listening can
explain that to us.
Yeah, but they're mean. The black ones they're
cantankerous.
Oh yeah, like back when I worked in Kent, like there were your gray and brown squirrels and black squirrels, and the black squirrels were always beating the shit out of the other ones.
Oh boy,
like you'd see all
they're tough.
Oh yeah, like black squirrels were wounded with like tufts of hair missing off of their tails and stuff.
Cool.
So
that's no good. Okay,
so that was an aside.
Yeah.
Neurodivergence ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you decide to write?
Oh gosh, so this is a nice meaty story, right? So, I am the child and grandchild and niece of people who have written their whole lives. My grandfather on my mother's side and my uncle on her side were both college professors. My grandfather, the head of an English department at University in Texas. My uncle was the head of the literature classics department at Dartmouth University in the Northeast. I was raised like being taught how to write, even though it wasn't something I was really interested in. I didn't get a choice about that. So I grew up doing book reports in the summer for my mother because she insisted. And by the time I got to the high school, if people were having problems with their grammar and syntax and writings, the English teacher would send them to me to help sort them out if he was too busy, which was something my mom did. She graded her dad's college, her students' papers in college for them, for him. So it's just kind of this thing that's always been there. I also grew up knowing far more than any teenager should ever know about Homer and the Iliad and Chaucer and all those classics because that's what my family loved. Not really me. My plan was to be an illustrator for Marvel. So you can see how writing wasn't really top of mind for me, but it's a skill that I have, right? So throughout my career, I've always found myself needing to, do presentations and write presentations and emails. And for my master's, I had to write like a thesis. So there was this sort of process of learning how to write for business that I had to unlearn in this book. I always knew I had some kind of book in me. I just wasn't sure what it was, never could really find that voice until I found Erica. Right. And I was like, oh, that's why nothing was really coming out. And then during the first year and a half, 2 years of transition, I had a bunch of people ask me, just sort of advice because I'm 52. I know that's so surprising to people. I've been around for a long time. I've seen a lot of stuff, and you'll hear a lot about that in chapter 1 of this book. And someone that people feel, I guess, safe telling their secrets to. I can't tell you how many people come up to me. And I think this is also kind of common with trans people. When other people come to us, they're like, oh, I can tell you things. And so I've always been this sort of person that people ask for advice. I'm like, well, I don't know. Here's what I think. You can do whatever with it. And so having been on the speaker circuit for a while for trans people and getting all these questions from people kind of like heart in their throat, like, I need to ask you a question I'm scared to ask, right? Like, I'm out as trans. How do I go about finding a new job? What do I need to worry about? Stuff like that. So I had lunch with a friend that I used to work with last September or October before they left to go visit family in India for 4 months. And she said to me, because I was like, man, I really want to write a book. And she's like, well, you should write about all the questions you answer people. I watched you do it a million times, really good at it. And I was like, really? And that is how we wound up writing this book. So I went from knowing I needed to write something, but not having direction, to doing the thing that I do all the time and having someone suggest something incredibly obvious to me.
I mean, it's what it takes. We have to be beat over the head with the sledgehammer sometimes to be like, oh yeah, this is what I should be doing. So
yeah.
But we get asked questions all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, me just as like my little self. I mean, Erica, you're in front of people like with work and speaking and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're in front of people a lot too, though.
Not in a different way. Oh, great. Lawnmower. Can you hear the lawnmower?
I can hear a little bit, but we can chop this.
Oh, well. It'll edit that out. So, so you pretty much have writing in your blood. But am I hearing some art in your blood too with the whole Marvel Illustrator thing?
So when I was a kid, I was always a creative kid, very dramatic, no surprise. And when I was, I think in elementary school, my best friends were drawing all the time and they loved it. And I was like, oh, that seems kind of fun. So I just started drawing, making my own cartoon characters, and I got really good at it. And my favorite thing about school was art class. Like if there was an art class, I took it in middle school and high school. I think I took like 4.5, 5 years of art classes in high school because I just loved it. And I had been drawing at a pretty high level, illustrating at a pretty high level, like comic books and things like that, since I was in 7th grade. So I always thought like, oh, I should go work for Marvel and draw for them. That's something that I would love. But also in high school, I had a chance to take a graphic design class, which was something I'd never heard of before. And granted, this is in the 80s because I'm that old. So I got a really exposure to how we make ads, how we make logos. And I thought, this is really cool. If the illustration thing doesn't work out, that's what I want to do. I also did other things like I did, I was part of the video. I was part of the AV club, audio and video. My dad is a sound engineer, right? So I grew up in hearing music all the time and being in recording studios. And, you know, I know how to run sound. So I know how to do all of these creative applications, right? So I went to university. I went to study art and didn't work out with illustration because while I was good for me and my circle of friends, even though I won awards in high school, I was not that good, right? At the time that I was planning to go to work for Marvel, there probably were 30 illustrators across the entire United States working for Marvel. 30 out of thousands, right? So that dream ended really quickly, but I jumped into photography and graphic design and really loved that. So my whole career until about 10 years ago, 15 years ago was digital design. So I
didn't know that about you.
Yeah. I've done tons of logos, websites, brochure books, quite a few coffee table books for people. I was actually a creative director of a decor fabric company for a while out of Germany, which was a weird experience. I've designed trade show booths. I've designed, billboards. And so yeah, I have like a really kind of creative background, and writing was never a huge feature of that. It was always like, well, I know how to write.
It's so something that's handy to have.
And so I was able to leverage that.
Yeah.
But also I found throughout my career that I kept getting put in front of clients because I was the person that could speak to clients and hear what they wanted and hear their vision and make it manifest without necessarily having to do the work. So pretty quickly through my career, I stopped being the person doing the design work. I started being the person managing it. And after a certain amount of time and working in the digital world, I was like, well, I should just focus on digital marketing and product management, which is what I do today. And I occasionally pull out Photoshop or Illustrator or Figma or InDesign or whatever people use, and I can get around and do exactly what I want. But I don't do that for a career. And frankly, at this point, I would hate doing for a career. Pushing pixels around is not my favorite thing.
It's what I do for a living as a photographer. And actually, while as you were signing on, I was downloading an older version of Photoshop because the new version is so bloated. I've upgraded my computer. Yeah. Okay. I have a new CPU. I have a new graphics card. I have running 64 gigs of RAM. And it's so bloated and slow, nothing works. So I downloaded an earlier version and see how it works. But
yeah. So I haven't tried the latest version of Photoshop because I use Lightroom a lot when I need to. But I recently upgraded to the latest version of Illustrator, and all of my keystroke commands don't work with my Apple Magic keyboard. It actually causes it to crash. So it's been wild to be like, oh, I now have to like click on things instead of do a bunch of keystrokes that I'd memorized over 20 years.
Oh, I know. Yeah, the keystrokes, it's all about keystrokes. Like,
because I
couldn't survive without them.
Fast.
yeah. PSA to anyone that works in Photoshop, and if you're struggling and you've been upgrading your computer and still not getting any better, it's not you, it's not your computer, it's fucking Photoshop. So anyone at Adobe listening, go look on Reddit and all the people that are pissed off right now. Not that you care, but
yeah. And I've noticed too that since they've gone to more of an online version, sort of like Microsoft 365 for all of their business suite, like it's gotten slower, even though the install is local to your computer. That connection while running heavy processes causes like extra lag. It's a problem.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm seeing, because I have the subscription, but I'm paying $60 a month. I shouldn't have to install an old version.
No,
just to be able to do my work.
You should not. It should be fast and furious.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, we were talking about writing though, weren't we?
Yeah.
So yeah, the idea was kind of planted in you, which is an amazing one, because anyone in the trans community can attest to this. So for our cis listeners, we get asked questions all the time from cisgender people, from other trans people.
Daily
a lot of times.
exercise.
Oh yeah. Sometimes very personal. Sometimes a little bit more out there. And I should probably make something clear here. Just because you know a trans person doesn't mean you can ask them about what's between their legs, or if they're on medication. You don't have to medically transition to be trans. There's no real rules to it.
That is correct.
Yeah, so
I write about that a lot in the book.
I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Be respectful.
Be respectful. And honestly, my message to all of our cis friends out there is that medical questions generally don't need to be asked. In the same way that you probably don't reveal your medical history to people you only kind of know or you work with or whatever, we don't want to either. And if you feel that you need to ask us that question, I think you need to ask yourself, why do I need to know that about Erica or Vanessa? Right? The only people who need to know my medical history are the people who share my bed.
Mm-hmm. And your doctor.
And hopefully my doctor does.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows I have a vagina because I flaunt it all over the place, but
sure.
I'm an exception, not the norm. So
yeah, and I've been open to, because kind of in the process of writing the book and the work that you and I do, like we talk about that, we give people advice. It's not a secret, the things that I've done. But if you've not, when I make new friends that are cis, I had this happen not too long ago, where I knew someone we were just kind of get to know each other well. We'd gotten past kind of the acquaintance phase, and I was driving us somewhere and she just launched into all of these questions. I was like, oh, here we are. You're asking the personal questions, and we kind of know each other close to well, but you haven't been on this journey with me. And I really had to think for a moment. And for me, in the moment, I decided to answer her questions for her education, frankly, that it needed to happen. But it's weird when someone asks you, what surgeries have you done? That's not something that new friends or even regular friends ask people. I know that it's sensational, it's salacious, and people want to know, but honestly, it's not going to affect your life to know. And you're not going to have enough information to understand what we're really telling you anyways.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what Erica and I are trying to say is Google that shit.
Google it. There's tons of information, tons of great information. And frankly, cis people, we know more about our bodily functions than you do. And the language that we use is going to be way over your head.
Mm-hmm.
I know far more about how hormones work in my system than almost any cis woman I know.
Mm-hmm. I have cis women asking me about Jenny was asking me about hormones, and I'm like, girl, just get all the hormones that you can possibly get. Just stuff yourself full of estrogen. It's the best thing ever. So
yeah.
So back to writing. Sorry, everybody. Again, ADHD brain. One thing, I used to actually write quite a bit when I was little.
Yeah.
I was like your nerdy online role player, online chat room role play, on AOL, Red Dragon Inn. Dragon Realms, which was, I think you called it Mud or something like that. It's like a text-based role-playing. And so I wrote all the backstories on my characters. When I played Warcraft, I wrote all the backstories on my characters. And, like, I even researched, to make sure that everything kind of fit the canon. But my biggest problem that I've had when it actually comes to sitting down and actually writing something is I don't go into it with organization because I'm such a stream of consciousness person that I just start writing and kind of hope that a book's just going to come out of my head, but it's not how it works.
That is not how it works.
No. So how did you, you had the idea, you're going to write a book.
Yeah.
How did you organize your brain to let you do it? Like, what were your steps?
So for me, I had a couple things going for me. I am quite scatterbrained, but when I get focused, I can really get into things. And from my creative career, I was one of the most organized creatives you're going to find. Not because I am normally an organized person, but the way that I worked, I love adding tons of visual texture. This won't make sense if you're probably not Vanessa or another designer. Vanessa, my files would have 75 layers in them. Well organized. Right?
Wow.
Yeah. And tons of texture, building up multiple layers just to get an effect. That's my favorite thing, right?
Your computer hated you.
Yeah. Well, I certainly wouldn't use a laptop like I do today for that. And frequently I found myself working for advertising agencies, inheriting files from other people and needing to organize them because this is the ad we ran last year, but we need you to change the date. Where the fuck is the date field in this file that I need to find? It's locked and I can't get it to do anything. So I have to organize it. So that sort of ability to get really invested in something and just label things really helped me. Now, when I sat down to write, knowing that I had that ability to kind of get really invested in something, I really worked to leverage that up front. I knew from having started writing I probably made 3 or 4 attempts to write a book before I got to this one. And I know that for me, organization was a problem. And like you said, you're sort of just sitting down to write. It doesn't really come out that way. Maybe after I write my second or third book, I could just sit down and write, but I don't think I could do that yet. So when I sat down to write this book, because I knew the format and I knew what I wanted to happen. So I wrote a nonfiction book, not like fiction. So I would handle fiction differently. So the first thing I did was I thought about, okay, what are all the questions that I get asked that are common that I think people need to hear? So I just started stream of consciousness, just in Excel, writing just the questions, not the answers, just the questions. And then okay, this is really messy. Can I organize this somehow? Right. So I organized things into 6 chapters that sort of kind of go together. You'll see in the book that there are 6 chapters and the topics kind of loosely tie together, but I could have written 10 chapters, but I would still be writing that book a year from now if I did that. So it was just so I think sitting down and writing down almost like in an outline form is what works. What worked for me. I think it works for a lot of people. I do know that if you're a fiction writer, you start out with what you were talking about, character backgrounds, you have a premise. And I've heard this technique where you kind of write the end of the story. And I don't mean literally write the end of the story, but where are we going to be at? And then you sort of scatter everything to the winds as you go towards the front.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. So you start with here's what I want to get to.
Yeah.
And then you figure out, well, when do I tell this little story and that little story? And I think when you think about, when you don't start off writing and you start off organizing in a bulleted list or whatever, it becomes a lot easier to translate that. And so once I had that, I knew what each chapter was going to have. I knew all the questions, and I had more in there than I used because I just needed to cut it down for length. So I was planning, I already knew that I might need to chop some things, just also based on hey, this one was way better and it was longer than that one, which was I just too weak on that. Once I had that, then I was able to sit down and actually write. And I think for me, what I did first was write chapter 2, because that was the first chapter of really getting into questions. And chapter 1 was like the intro. It's the shortest chapter in the book. It's like 2,500 words. So I waited to write that one because I didn't know where to start. And so I started writing chapter 2 so that I could practice. And I rewrote it probably 4 times, chapter 2, before I did anything else, because I needed to figure out my voice. I will say, before I sat down with the book, I knew I wanted to write something probably 6 months before that. And so I just sat down and started writing little articles. I paid attention to what I was writing on social media. I paid attention to, I started a blog just as practice. I think we all need practice writing.
Yeah.
And so being thoughtful about social media posts really helped me kind of get into this modality of writing and learning how to write again. And for me, it worked because, well, a social media post that would be in depth was about the length of an answer to a question I wanted to give anyways, 500 words, which is really hard to do that in Threads or in a blog. It's easier because you can just write as long as you want. So I think there's a part of like, what's my premise? How do I organize first? And do I need to just practice writing like throwaway pieces, short stories, essays, just to kind of get your rhythm down? And there's a lot to, I think, the practice of writing that has to happen before you can write a book. I think that's something that most people don't really think of. It's sort of like you wouldn't run a marathon on your first day of running. You would run a mile.
Yeah.
Maybe. Right?
You have to warm yourself up. You're stretching your muscles.
Yeah. So that's what I would recommend to people. The organization, I know not everybody's organization is not easy to everybody, but it's probably the easiest place to start with, because you give yourself, you build a structure of here's what I want to say without having to write what I want to say yet. And then finding little ways to practice writing helps you figure out the ebb and flow. Like for me, I need to write something. I know, like if I were to write something for a blog or whatever, I know that I want to write a question of, what should I consider while looking for a job as someone who's trans? And I would just sort of let that tumble around in the back of my brain for a day or two. And then I would sit down to write, and I wouldn't worry about anything. I would just stream of conscious that shit out, right? Just like, I'm not worried about grammar or spelling or whether the sentences make sense. I'm just unloading what's in my brain.
Get the information on paper.
Just get it on paper. Don't worry about it. Don't judge me. Then the next day, because I'm really big on like, I need a 24-hour break so that my brain can work in the background. And then I come through and I'm like, okay, this point was good. That point was good. I work on like, what's the order of what I wanted to say? Again, I'm not really judging what I wrote, right? So I'm like, oh, this point was really good. And that makes sense as the first point. So I reorganize what I write. And then if I'm still feeling fresh with that topic, I will sit down and just literally rewrite each sentence all the way through, because I've done a couple of rough drafts by that point. And once I've done that, then I usually walk away for 24 hours more.
Smart.
And come back, and then I'll take a look at, do I have good sentence structure? Is my grammar okay? Is the spelling good? Does it read and I'll read it out loud so that I can hear it. And that's kind of my process. So I honestly write everything 3 times before I'm like, this is good.
That's smart. That's smart. You've given some good advice here.
Yeah, I think that's where people get hung up. They get, if you're a person who studied a ton of grammar, and I was really rusty, so it took me a while to learn. If you have all those rules of, what to do exactly when, and when is a colon or an Oxford comma or all that bullshit, like that stuff just flows out of you. But I think most of us, we haven't practiced that. And if you just write without judgment and understand, like, I'm not judging what I wrote, I'm just unburdening my brain on this topic and seeing if I have something worth taking forward. I think people want to get it right on that first cut. And I'm not sure today, after a year of writing like this, that I could get that in one cut.
It's practice, just with, as you said, you have to practice writing. Just like anything else. And that is amazing advice for me, because like I'm in the mindset where I need to write it and have it right the first time.
No.
And your advice is to get it all out there and then go from there, work on it from there. Because then you have all of your things, then you can organize it, then you can start condensing, expanding.
And I think what that helps people do is if you just sit down and write. And sometimes I don't know how to start a prompt. So I'll just be like, I will literally start typing, I don't know what I need to write here, but I'm about to write about looking for a job as a trans person, and I probably want to make these points. And then within 10 seconds, I'm off to the races, right? I will just literally write nonsense until my brain's like, oh, okay, we are doing this right now. And again, like, I think you got to not judge that. And if you focus on spelling and grammar, whether it makes sense, for me, I don't know about for you, that destroys my flow. As soon as I stop to be like, oh, I didn't spell that right, I've lost what I was going to say and I have to get restarted. I would rather power through 500 words that look like crap, but I got everything out, than stop and edit things. Not everybody's like that. That's how I am. And if you're struggling with that part, don't stop. Just write. Worry about how it looks or how it sounds later on. Just get all your ideas out there.
Thank you. Shit.
That's what works for me.
Yeah, no, that's because that's not what I do. Like, but you kind of need to reprogram yourself to do that. And exactly, don't overthink it.
Yeah, and like
keep it simple.
To put it in even more in your context, right? Because I know right now you're in the place with your photography where you're shooting regularly. I feel like I see a post from you like every day at someone's house or whatever, pretty often. So your muscle memory of that camera is pretty much on point. You know, having done photography as well, like the more I use the camera, the quicker I can focus and get the f-stop right and the speed of the aperture within a couple seconds. At first, no, right? And it's sort of, that's what I'm describing is that process to get to muscle memory takes time. Even if it's something you've done in the past, you need to remember how to do it. And so your first few forays need to be without judgment and just taking your time. And you're not like with a photo, you're not worried about whether the photo's good. You're trying to make sure, can I use my camera correctly again?
It's kind of reminds me of like learning to drive, where because there's so much muscle memory involved with that. Like if you think back to when you learned to drive, you were terrified, you were overthinking everything, every little thing, and now we fucking fall asleep at the wheel sometimes because we're so just chill about it.
I remember being terrified when I was driving down, like the highway was less terrifying to me than like a little side road, right, where someone was going to be driving right past my car, and that gave me the most terror until I got used to that. And writing a book is just not something we pick up and do unless we've written a bunch of books, unless it's our job. And it's, I would say today, it's still not my job. It's something that I am hoping becomes a job. I am not good enough yet for it to be my full-time job. I am still, it's like going to college. I am still learning how I write. And I think that's an important thing to remember for those of you that want to write. There is how other people write, but there's then how do you write and what's your process and what your sound is and what your voice is. If you have books that really resonate with you, pay attention to those, but you have to find your own thing. And sometimes it helps to mimic others to kind of get the process going, but then you need to find your voice. So in that when I wrote that second chapter 4 or 5, probably honestly 6 times, mostly what I was looking for was what sounds like me if I said it out loud, but wouldn't be obnoxious to read. Right? Because because I repeat myself, right? When I talk, that's what I'm waiting to see. Like, when does Vanessa's eyes open up like she gets it? So I'll keep repeating things, but I cannot write that way. So I had to learn how to think of, well, how does Erica sound? And I wanted people to read this book and be like, well, that's exactly what she would say, but in a more condensed form because it's words on a page. And that took me a while to find.
Because I do like to write how I talk, but obviously I can't put in whatever, all my filler words.
It becomes obnoxious. That's the thing that really caught me. It becomes obnoxious to read filler words. And there are books that I read today, fiction books, or where we're reading people's conversations, and there might be one filler word in there, like But if there were the real amount of filler words in there, it would be really obnoxious to have to read that. And so stripping that stuff out that's what I had to figure out how to do. Word economy is a big deal in writing.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like where speeches come from then too. Where you're trying to get your voice out there and then say it aloud. And it's hard. It really is.
Yeah. One other trick that I tried at first, I don't do it anymore. If I was really stuck, I would, is that I would just turn on my phone and talk about the topic I wanted to write. Right? And then I would take that and be like, okay, I would listen to it, and then I would type out a more condensed version. And that really went a long way for me to find what my voice sounded like from speech to book. So that's another technique, is try just audio recording it and then rewriting it.
And yeah, because it's also kind of using a different function in your brain too, where you're using your speech centers instead of tactile centers when you're writing.
Totally.
So, because somebody it's very fact, like conversations in general, like you can have a conversation on the phone with somebody and you just both just yammer on and yammer on and yammer on. But like if you sat down to try to write a phone conversation, that's a complete different thing. So what Erica's saying, like, say it out loud and then kind of go from there. So
yeah, it's a great technique. And if I was, there's a few places in the book where I don't really relay a conversation, but I sort of give a truncated, recounted version of that. And I actually just recorded what I remembered, because it's really difficult to think about, like, if I was to write out a transcript of what you and I just said, I wouldn't even know where to start with that. And it would sound it wouldn't sound like two people actually talking.
So once you're into the nitty gritty of it, did you find a period where the flow started coming a little bit more steady?
Yeah, it was hard at first. I wrote, it took me the longest time. At the halfway, it took me about 6 months to write the book. I wrote a third of the book in 3 months and the other 2/3 in 3 months. So like there is a flow that happens. And for me, I don't know how other people operate. I like to build habits in the smallest ways possible. I find that's how I'm successful. So I would sit down and write for 10 minutes. If that's all I had that day, write for 10 minutes. That's a couple sentences, right? It doesn't sound like progress, but eventually that 10 minutes becomes 20, 30. You kind of get into that process. For me, making time every day after I finished work, but before I was tired, or if I had a break at lunch or something, to just write for a little bit or to think about something and organize, that's when the flow happens, because then I can just sit down and go, right? So like you don't have to... There's the thing, now that I'm sort of on the author sides of Threads, people out there reporting out their word count daily, and if you're a new author, ignore that bullshit. Here's why. Like our friend Samantha Tano, who was supposed to be on with us today, but wasn't able to. I watch her word count. I think she reports on it most couple of days, and like she's working on her second book, and she has ripped through that book in a couple of months. Now, if I was a new writer and seeing like she wrote 45,000 words in a couple of weeks, I'd be like, I'm done. I can't do that. Right? So ignore what other people are doing. If you hear about that stuff, I know it's fun to track, but it's honestly going to give you anxiety until you have that habit. And granted, my book is about 35,000 words. Sam Tano's books are way longer than that, and they're fiction, right? So I also set like a limit. I do like 30,000 words, probably 80 pages, probably 160 in print. That's pretty good for what I'm trying to achieve. I was not trying to write a tome. And eventually, after I got that flow going, I started being like, well, this doesn't really fit. It's a good topic, but maybe that's book 2, or maybe that's a blog post, because it's just not working here. I was not afraid to cut stuff out, nor was I afraid to say this chapter needs to be 5,000 to 7,500 words.
And that gives you some constraints to work within too.
Totally. Especially if it's nonfiction. People's tolerance for nonfiction is not as much as a fiction book. They're typically not as engaging depending on your topic, especially if you're writing a memoir, for God's sakes. Oh my goodness, like word economy is going to be important, because you just cannot recount every important thing that's happened in your life. And if you set out to do that, you're going to come up with something like War and Peace.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing as a memoir.
Yeah.
And that's
So I would
keep it.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was like, keep it simple, stupid.
Yes, very much so. There's a lot of memoirs out there for trans people. I think it's a great thing for us to write about. It helps people who are sort of trying to figure themselves out. It helps people kind of new to the path. It helps our cis friends, family, coworkers to read our memoirs. I love trans memoirs. I've read quite a few. I think my advice for those of you that want to write a memoir is to think about you can't tell your whole life story. You're not going to hold people's attention. So like, obviously I'd assume you'd write about being trans, Vanessa. So what were the...
I'm actually not.
Oh, okay, cool. So if you're not writing about that...
It'll be in there, but...
So figure out what's the message in your life that you want people to read, and just go find the things that connect to that. Not everything. Like if something happened at 5 years old that you recall fits into that message, great. If the things that happen from 5 to 10 don't, leave them out. You're just writing stuff that's filler. It won't move the story forward. Figure out what you want to tell in that memoir.
You don't want to lose the audience.
Yeah. Plus, it's impossible to write all that stuff and keep it interesting. Mm-hmm. Some of my favorite memoirs, they do a really good job of being like, a memoir is a bunch of stories connected together by whatever the central theme is, right? Yeah. So it's like, oh, here's something that happened to me when I was 7 that I remembered, right? Here's something that happened to me at 10 that I remembered that kind of fits in with that. Here's something that happened as a teenager. Here's something that happened later, like things that fit within the premise, not everything. And that'll cut down on what you have to write. And I think for memoirs where people kind of lose the thread is that it's a story made up of a bunch of little stories. So when you want to sit down to start writing that, pick a thing that fits within your thread and just write that one little story, whether it's 1 page or 10 pages, and see if that works.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah, I've already done kind of like a draft of a memoir. I don't know if I ever sent it to you. I wrote it right after I came out. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It's about my family and family business.
Oh, yeah. I know that y'all had a family business. I know nothing about it.
It's kind of like I was what's that?
Aren't you like the chief operating officer or something like that?
I was the everything. So I was the everything. Senior VP is what my official title was, but I had to change it for resumes. Who's the younger royal guy? What's his name?
William. No, not William.
No. Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Like how he wrote the book, Despair.
Mm-hmm.
And my situation, while definitely not on that level, was kind of similar along that.
Family business, like the heir apparent.
I was the backup.
The backup. Oh, so, like Despair.
Exactly. So, but yeah, like, I've been like unpacking trauma and stuff like that through therapy. And I wrote this like kind of like, it's like a 3-part memoir, separated between like 13-year chunks or something. But, I kind of wanted to use that as like a basic guiding point, and then expand on the things that need to be expanded on and maybe not on the things that don't. So
exactly. Everything doesn't belong in the book. And while I don't want you to be ruthless with yourself, I want you to be ruthless with your stories. If they don't tie it to the central theme you want to tell, save them. They could be for something else. Find the stories that, and try to describe that moment. Like, it's not just like, hey, when I was 8, my parents divorced and I moved to Florida. That's not a story. The story there is my parents divorced when I actually divorced much sooner than that. And we moved to Florida with my dad, and my mom disappeared for 4 years. And so we were living on some family's property in a little white house. And, and I could, describe the house. And then sort of like, well, what's important about you being there? Well, I had to figure out how it was like to live without a mom in the picture for a while. And I just started a new school, and I made friends that I had problems with. And like, you could very quickly tell a little story about that. Right. But like the thing that happened at 10 on the soccer field when we didn't win the game, if it doesn't really buy into the central premise, is wasted writing.
Mm-hmm. If anything, use it possibly as an anecdote, but
yeah. And when you read, I know that you're just beginning to read the book. When you read the book, I kept things pretty high level, like because I'm doing things in 500 to 700 word prompts. I can't tell a lengthy story. I just can't. So I kind of give the high points, but then I use that to be like, this is something you should think about based on an experience that I had, and here's a recommendation. So I don't tell you what to do. I really leave you with, here's something to think about. And then you make your own decision. The point of this book is helping you make better decisions for yourself, not me telling you, because that's not a job that I want. So in your memoir, I've listened to you tell stories before, Vanessa. You can tell a story. You could literally think of a story that you want to tell for that memoir and say it out loud to someone that you trust to just hear it and take their feedback and be like, well, and I think the thing that's important to convey to people is they need something to hang on to, especially if it's a story that needs to feel real to them. So describe the scene, set the stage, and whatever makes sense.
I thank you. Oh, shit. Yeah, because like my plan that I had in my head was to like start at the beginning and just go from there. And
organize.
Now I'm like, okay,
you don't have to.
No, focus on the big stories, the wild, the things that when I tell people the story, their jaw hits the floor.
Yes.
And just do those.
Yeah. In my book, my stories don't go in sequential order. They are literally trying to help make a point. One of my favorite memoirs is Billy Porter's memoir, Unprotected. And he starts off with what's going on in his life. And he writes this during COVID and like just being so angry at Trump. And so this book is really kind of being this unhinged place about what's going on with COVID and Trump and trying to protect him and his family and his job, while occasionally reaching back to tell you about the first time he sung in front of his church. But then the next story might be his first Broadway gig. And then he might come back to something that happens at 12, because it wasn't about the chronological order. It was, what's the point I need to make next? And what's the story I have in my life that props that point up? Don't worry about chronology. Worry about what's the main point that I want to make in this chapter or this section? And what story do I have that props that up?
You just blew my fucking mind.
Yeah. Like, don't worry about sequence. The only time sequence matters is in fiction.
Yeah. Fuck. And now I think about it, like, I remember reading like comedy memoirs. This is one guy, I forget his name. He's like this absolute fucking pig. There's he made a movie about it, like where he shit himself in a hotel lobby or something like that. But I was reading his books and they were fucking hilarious. And they are guide for how men should not act. Yeah. But his stories were not in sequential order.
No.
And it was just, yeah.
Listen.
Thank you.
There are no, maybe I'm not well educated on this enough to tell you, but I firmly believe that there are no rules when it comes to writing. Outside of readability rules, there's no rules. Break them. Tell the story you want to tell. Throw out convention. Throw out sequence if you need to. Describe a story in lush detail, and then the next one in brushstrokes. Write the way that makes sense to you. What's important is that when people read it, they're like, I get Vanessa. That sounds like what she would say. This sounds like her life, right? It's a love affair. It's effectively a love affair because you're going to write this thing for a while. And then you have to do the unimaginable. You're going to have to turn it over to someone to judge and decide what should happen with it.
Yeah. And when that shit's out of your control. Yeah. And then all of your raw, everything that you've poured into this work that you've done. And then they just take it, they roll it up, and they start beating you over the head with it. So
it can be brutal. And And I think for me, having spent so much, I'd love to tell stories, but we're a family of storytellers, right? We like if you're ever in the DC area, you hang out with my wife and I, we're going to be competing to tell you a story. We love to tell stories. So I have practice in that. I have practice in writing, but I had to have faith in what I was doing and why I was doing it as the driving force. And what I had to keep going back to was, well, people keep asking for this from me. Right. And, like I said, it becomes this kind of love affair. It's like giving birth. It's laborious. It's a lot of work. And then you have to like let it go so that people can edit it, right? Which can be really rough. So I would definitely say, if you're thinking about writing a book, you got to work on your self-criticism, because A, you need to be honest with yourself in your writing, like, this doesn't sound right. What should I change? And B, someone else is going to have to edit that, because you're probably not good enough to edit your own book. Right. And then you have to do the phase that I'm in. I have to come and beg all my friends like Vanessa and be like, can you read my book and give me a review? Because I need that for marketing. And no one has read this book yet. Well, maybe 20 people have read it now. Right. So you're sort of constantly putting this incredibly vulnerable part of yourself out there, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction or writing about someone else, it's still coming from you. Right. So I think you have to embrace that vulnerability. And the more you embrace that vulnerability, the better your writing gets. People, that's what they connect with.
You have to learn to remember that, especially like if you have to set a publisher, and they want to make money off of it too.
Yep.
So their words are, this is what we think will make the most success, They might not always be right. And I mean, you see that in the film industry constantly, where totally. There's an amazing script and then it gets ripped up. But
yeah. So let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think people need to be aware of this. If because once you get past the halfway point, you're like, oh, I've learned how to do this. Right. And you start thinking about the end stage and getting it there. But then you got to get in front of a publisher. And I was going to wait till I was done. My wife has, she's a retired academic now. She works in the private sector, but she has 2 books out there. And she's like, you do not want to wait, because if a publisher wants to change what you're writing, then you've wasted a bunch of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So once you have
6 months,
once you have a couple of chapters, start looking into publishers. There's really 3 ways to go. There is what we think of as traditional publishing, where, they do all the work for you, right? You give them the manuscript, and but you also make the least per book on that, but then you fork over no money, right? These are like the Penguin Publishing House types place. So the thing that's difficult about that is, you have to have something amazing to get their attention. And if you don't have a literary agent, it's going to be even harder. And you're not going to have a literary agent until you have a book published, or unless you're famous already, which I don't have. So I didn't either. I submitted to like 1 or 2 publishers, but never heard anything back. Then I looked at self-publishing, which everybody can do self-publishing, but it is the most work because you do everything and you pay for everything. So you got to edit it or hire an editor. You got to design the cover or hire someone to design a cover, and you got to pay all the printing costs and set all that stuff up. So if you are not a very organized person, this would be a great place to have, when Sam's up to it, to be back on, because that's what she did. And then there's the third version, which I did, which is called hybrid publishing. What you do is you basically hire someone to be your publisher. They do some of the work, you do some of the work. So I actually wound up, so the cover of my book that went on Threads recently, the first couple of versions they just weren't working for me. And so I was like, wait, look, I was a designer. And I banged out like 6 versions over 2 days, and they loved the first one that I did. And I was like, great, have your designer make this into reality. And they made like a couple tiny changes. So that's not something I would have with a traditional publisher. And if I was a self-publisher, I would have to do that myself, which is not easy. So hybrid publishing gives me, the only thing the publisher has rights to is the manuscript that they printed in book format. So I could, if I'm not happy with them, I can take this, go to another publisher, have them reprint the same book. And I own everything, right? The only thing I don't own is like this version in print.
Yeah.
So it gives me the most control. But it does mean you have to have some expendable cash to do that, right? Because you're hiring a firm to do it for you. I happen to be in that position. But it also means that I'm going to make not as much as I would with self-publishing, but I'll make a couple of dollars per book that I sell, which is better. Yeah, which is better than like traditional publishing, because they're going to sell that stuff in volume, but you might get like $1 per book, which sounds crazy. But when you sell 1 million of them,
it adds up quick.
Right. So you need to look into publishing once you feel like you're underway and you know what you're doing, you know where you're going. Send them a sample. I would say find someone who feels like a partner. This is your vision. You've invested tons into getting to where you are. I found a queer publisher because I'm doing a queer book on trans people.
Probably smart.
And I loved her. We connected instantly. And what I wanted was someone who got my vision and wanted to bring it about, not someone who's like, I can make money off your book. She will make money off my book. That's not her motivation.
Yeah, the money is, that's when you know you're working with the right person, when the money isn't the primary focus. You know, we all have to make an income, right?
Yeah, That's the world we live in.
Yeah. But when there's some passion involved with it too, that really, really helps. Like, you know, when you're working with someone that loves what they do, rather than just go through the motions. That's how I try to sell my photography to people. Yeah. Like, look, I know, like, I'm proud of what I do here. So,
well, and you have something that I think you particularly, but I think also trans people who've gone through transition, whether it's social or medical or legal, right? But you as a creative, right? You know what it takes to bring about a project. You know that things look messy in the beginning and then get better the longer you work on them. In transition, things are messy in the beginning and it gets better the longer we do it. It is a long haul. It is a fucking marathon of 3+ years at a minimum.
You remember the first 6 months? Shit.
God, they were a fever dream. And I must have been the most annoying person on the planet.
Sweet.
I love all you new trans people. Please know that it gets better and it gets a lot less chaotic.
It's a learning curve, just like anything else.
So I think the skills that we use in transition, in researching medical procedures and dealing with the administrivia of like medical forms and insurance, all of that actually enables us in our writing because it requires stick-to-itiveness and organization and like pushing through barriers and getting shit done and talking to people and writing a book is not actually all that different. And when you have a creative endeavor like Vanessa, you know what it's like to sort of bring forth something creative from yourself. Just because it's words doesn't mean it's all that different than knowing your aperture and f-stop for your camera.
Yeah, exactly. It's all flows together in the end. So
and I think the final thing that has to happen is, frankly, you got to believe in yourself. There's so much work. I'm not trying to dissuade people. Please understand, but like, in order to pour something out of yourself like this, you have to believe that you have something to say that people want to hear. And you have to be willing to like come back to that well, because you're going to have days where you're like, my writing is shit. I don't know what I want to write about. I can't write anything. This sounds like garbage. I can tell you the panic. I was so happy with what I wrote halfway through. And then what I had finished with, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And 24 hours after I turned that into the manuscript, I was in like, I am the worst writer in the world. I've wasted 6 months, blah, blah, I should have done this. And like, now that we're in this process, I'm like, oh, it's great again. Right. So you got to be ready to kind of ride those emotional roller coasters, but you got to commit.
Be sure you have a therapist and I'll walk with you through all that shit.
Hell yes. Have someone to vent to, talk to, your therapist, your partner, your friend, someone you trust to bounce ideas off of, other writers. Don't compare yourself to other people. This is your story, not theirs.
Well, Erica, I know you just helped me a lot. And I'm hoping a lot of people are, with 90 listeners, I'm sure there's some people within there that have also had the idea of writing, but
I think we have stories in us. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. I mean, humans we love history in one way, shape, or form. And And like, stories are everywhere, true and fiction. And if it's in you, let it out. But I think the message here is try not to overthink it and let it flow.
Small bites.
Mm-hmm.
And those small bites become bigger bites.
Do you want to do the Cards Against Humanity game?
I'm sorry, is that something you're doing on the podcast now? I'm aware of the game, but not...
It's something, so it's up to you whether or not you want to.
Sure, let's do it. I love that game.
So,
I don't think I've ever played it with you or on a podcast.
It's like, I got the idea from like last week I had Nikki the Death Doula on, and she does these death cards at the end of her podcast. And like, what cards do I have? And I looked over to my left and I saw my old box, like the original Cards Against Humanity on them. So I'm like, what if we so when Jess hosts a show, they like to do an icebreaker. So this is like an after icebreaker.
Okay.
Where to like a cool down, where we each we pick a black card and then we just come up with our own answer for it. So it can be anywhere from Wild to Wild. So, okay. I'm just doing a little bit of a shuffle. So around where in the deck do you want me to pull your card from? Right here?
Right there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's your card.
Cool.
And I'm just going to grab one at random. This is my card. So for you, Daddy, why is Mommy crying?
Okay. Do I answer now or you go first with yours?
You can answer now. I haven't really solidified roles.
Daddy, why is Mommy crying? Because her baby boy's wearing a dress and looks fantastic.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Yeah, I read Daddy and I cringed. You know.
Well, it could be Daddy, why is Mommy crying? Because she needs it bad.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and for me, I don't even know what to do with this. Just saw this upsetting video. Please retweet. #stop. I'm way too fucking xennial for this. #stop.
Potato porn.
Yes. That's the funny thing is right before you said that, my brain went to mashed potatoes. So stop mashed potatoes porn.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erica.
That probably is out there, Frank.
Oh, I'm sure. It's at Rule 34. Have you ever looked at Rule 34?
No.
Do you know what it is?
No. I have an idea what it might be, so I'm curious.
If it exists, there's porn of it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a website, and it's pretty much guaranteed way to ruin your childhood. Like, anything you can think of, like, it's most likely going to be in there. Like,
oh, yeah.
So, Miss Frizzle fucking Groucho Marx or something.
Cool.
It's going to be...
Yeah, well, especially in this day and age of AI-generated images, it's even easier.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, like, back when I used to hop on there in the horny days, the before estrogen days, back when I actually got that, like, it was just the amount of things you found, but it was all hand-drawn art, so a lot of it was really fucking good, too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and most of it was chicks with dicks, almost, like, all over the place.
Tons of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, a lot of eggs out there.
Yeah, and most of the hate out there is people over-identifying with that and having some shame about it.
That's, an accusation isn't a mission.
I really hope that when you guys, I can't join you next week because I'm going to be on vacation, but I really hope, we'll throw this out there when you guys are talking about the state of affairs and voting, that you don't forget to mention Grindr at the RNC crashed.
Wait, really?
Oh, you didn't know about this?
No.
During the Republican National Convention, a Grindr at the site of the convention had so much traffic, no one in the rest of the country could use it.
Why
that tells you something about that. Oh, go look that up. Yeah.
Holy, I got goosebumps.
That tells you a lot about what's going on.
It does. For those not in the know, Grindr is the gay dating app. So, yeah.
All of your favorite people on the Republican side of the fence were busy using that app at the convention.
Mm-hmm. You see it all the damn time. So I did not know that. That's fascinating. Thank you for that.
It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Grindr's wild in general. My gay bestie tells me stories about it. I'm like, this sounds exhausting. So,
same. Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah. No. I'm happy with where I am now. So, Erica, do you have any closing thoughts?
Write your books, people. Just go write them. Practice. Have fun with it. Break it down to small bites. Have a good time. Also, go read my book when it comes out. Maybe in December. As soon as I have a date, I'll let you know. But for more information on that, go to my website, Erica Vogel, ERICAVOGEL.com. You'll be able to everything you need. Too much stuff. Probably too much Erica.
There's no such thing. So,
well, I hope so.
I just love your name. Anyways, Erica Vogel just flows well.
Yeah. I tell the story of how I came up with my name in the book.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find
I think you mentioned that on the podcast.
I did. Actually. Yeah. You'll find it in chapter 2, I think.
That's a big part of trans experience is you get to name yourself or not name yourself. It's up to you. Like it's perfectly valid too. Ian Thomas Malone, and all the other trans people that didn't change their names that aren't coming to my brain right now.
Yeah.
So,
what's hilarious about that? So I'm not going to tell it because you're going to go read it soon. And for those of you out there listening, you are gonna buy my book.
Yes, you are. One
of the things I did was ask my mom because she had told me, I don't know, 20 years ago what my name would have been if I had, been born female like I actually am. And I had forgotten what that name is. So in the process of figuring out the name that I wanted to go by, I was like, hey, what were you going to call me? The name she told me I was in no way prepared for. And I thought she was pulling my leg. So I laughed in her face and really hurt her feelings because it's a wild name. You have to read the book to find out.
Read the book to find out.
Mm-hmm.
So
when you read that, Erica, Vanessa, you're gonna text me and be like, "Holy shit!"
I'm excited. I'm excited. Once I finally get a chance to fucking read. So
okay,
Erica, thank you for popping on, and especially with our little restructuring here for this week. So and what Erica's talking about next week, my goal is to do a live episode. Next week is episode 50. I'm hoping to do it live. I tried doing a live one before. It failed miserably. But the more I thought about it, my guest was in the mountains in British Columbia. So her connection probably wasn't the greatest. So I'm hoping to have some familiar faces. I think Chloe is coming.
Good.
I'm working on Landon Reed. And I think Nikki Smith is coming back. And Zach.
Zach. Okay.
Yeah, Zach's going to be there. So he's going to be the old school THP person. So,
all right.
But yeah, we'll see what comes up, and I hope it works. And we're just going to be talking politics. So
tell everybody to be at home with their nice, stable connections.
That's what I told. I'm like, you have to have headphones that are fucking wired. You need to have good internet, and yeah. So, and of course, one of us will have a power outage or something. Probably.
Not. Oh gosh, I hope not. Right.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening to Transcending Humanity. Thank you again, Erica, for joining me this week, and see you next time.
See you guys later. Thanks for having me on, Vanessa. Appreciate you.